Hey, what's up? It is Jake from Nimbus DevOps, and I just wanted to follow up with a little bit of information for the students at Regent University. So today I did a panel about some career exploration stuff, and I know that some people had a lot of questions, so I figured I'd put a video on here. So if anybody comes to my YouTube channel, it's right at the front, easy to find, and we can have a conversation here as a group of people who are like-minded and interested. So a lot of you are interested in cybersecurity, but I spoke a lot about infrastructure, and this kind of applies to anyone. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about career switching and specifically getting if your goal is to get into AWS as an employer. So it doesn't matter where you come from, and it doesn't matter if you have a degree. I'll just say that right out of the gate. So if you're watching this and you don't have a degree, this applies to you as well. For the students at Regent, I know you're getting ready to graduate. You probably are in the Master's in Cybersecurity program, which is great. And maybe you work in IT now, or maybe you're trying to switch and you're doing this Master's as a way to kind of pivot from where you are to where you want to be. And this applies to you as well. So, the first thing I'll tell you is that, just like I told you in my um, panel and on my LinkedIn post, is that you should become familiar with a programming language. Why is that? Well, let me start with just going Python, PCEP. The Python Institute has this recommended program, this course. It's free, Python Essentials through OpenEDG, that begins with, I think I can log in here. It begins with understanding what exactly under study um, Python Essentials 1, and let's just go to resume. I haven't really started it yet. What is this and why is it important? So the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to get into like the introduction to not just Python, but like computer programming in general. So what is programming? How does it work? Um, how does a computer program work? This course that I found online is free. It's a great entry level, and there are so many courses on Python, but this one specifically starts out with just understanding lexicons and some of the terminology you'll hear from people who are like legit software developers or software engineers. So you can have that conversation with them and speak the same language in English before you start speaking the same language in programming. So that's where I'd start is just learning a programming language. Why Python? It's popular, it's highly regarded in many companies. If you're looking for a job, it's something you can do on the front end if you like that kind of stuff, but it's also something you can do in the back end if you like that kind of stuff. So it's flexible. It's very easy to read. Um, and I think it's really easy to learn as well because it makes syntactic sense from an English language perspective, should that be your native language. So that's where I'd start. The second place I'd start is just learning a cloud. AWS is the most widely used public cloud provider in the world. And so I would say if you're trying to transition into a career and you want statistics to be in your favor, that you should learn the cloud provider that gives you the most job opportunities. And since AWS alone has tons of job opportunities, and then there's so many other companies that use AWS, you're going to want to look for the greatest volume to have the most choices and the most opportunities, and that would be AWS. So that's why I say use it. GCP, Azure, they're all amazing cloud providers with some really great tools. I was GCP certified as well at one point in time as a professional architect, and I had a great time with it, and it was super awesome. I just think as a career switcher, AWS is a better choice for the reasons I just described. So what I would do is I would learn this, and I would learn that through Udemy, and Udemy is got a course by Stefan Merrick to learn the AWS SAAC 0202, which is going to change to 3 here in September. So if you don't get certified before September, just know that you might be looking at taking a new exam. So material may be a little outdated. Honestly, you'll probably be fine because there's a lot of things in the current exam that are just they're old and need to go away. So it's not as important as it is just learning. And you can learn to get a cert, or you can just learn by building. Getting the cert as a career switcher, I think, is a little more important compared to most people, just because you do need something to validate your skills. And without that experience, this certification really does help close that gap a little bit. It's a very valuable certification. As soon as you add it to your LinkedIn profile, you're going to get tons of people having a completely different conversation with you about potential career opportunities. So that's what I do next. After that, I'd start looking at, once you understand the cloud, is deploying things in the cloud, whether that's infrastructure, services, code, whatever it is, through some sort of automated means. Native to AWS, that would be getting really familiar with CloudFormation, understanding how stacks, nested stacks, templates, all that stuff work. Using a version control system like Code Commit, GitLab, GitHub, Bitbucket, something like that, to store all of your code. And as you go through this process, use that version control system as a portfolio for you to be able to put on your resume, to put on your LinkedIn profile, whatever you're doing. So that would be the next thing I do, is learn how to deploy it. If you want to look at industry standard and go something a little more cloud agnostic, you can look on this channel for more information on Terraform, which is another amazing tool that you can use for provisioning and deploying infrastructure resources. It's basically the same concept as CloudFormation, a little bit different language requirements and structure and capabilities as a service, but essentially it does the same function. The cloud native services will always have more tie-ins to other services via the API because it's native. So there will be things you can do in CloudFormation that maybe you can't do in Terraform, and vice versa, right? So if you're a multi-cloud customer, or you're looking to be working in a multi-cloud environment as an employee, then Terraform is a really great choice. If you're in an all AWS native environment, CloudFormation is going to be the go-to, and you'll see that on these job posts as you search for them. And I have a video on using LinkedIn to find what skills you need to close your gaps, and you can find that on this channel as well. So once you understand a programming language, you understand a cloud, you understand how to deploy things in an automated infrastructure as code type fashion, then it's just kind of like familiarizing yourself with the industry, the terminology, what's going on, the trends, the history, whatnot. And that's where I use podcasts. My favorite podcasts for this are Software Defined Talk, DevOps Paradox, and the Kubernetes podcast. But I also supplement those with some things that are kind of help you think outside the box. So Sawbones is a medical misguided, or a misguided medical history podcast that I love. Um, and Stuff You Should Know is another one that I do. History podcasts. Design Matters with Debbie Millman is an amazing podcast, just to kind of open your mind to the way that other people think outside of technology, to give you a more creative approach to how to solve problems and how other people go through their own processes, things you can borrow from other industries, other companies, et cetera, et cetera. So I listen to these podcasts daily. If I grab my phone here, you can see in my list of podcasts, if I go listen now, I can see that I've got a DevOps Paradox podcast I need to listen to. I've got my Stuff You Should Know episode that I should listen to. I've got this Kubernetes. I've got a new Sawbones. I've got the New York Times. So, today alone, as I listen to this, I'm going to listen to what is FinOps in the finance world, Stuff You Should Know on understanding the history of what happened with the Great Smog in London. Talking about the four horsemen of apocalypse in the Kubernetes domain, Havana syndrome and the Sawbones stuff, current events in the New York Times, and then talk about in software defined talk, they're going to talk about DevRel, developer relations, and understanding what is that and how does it fit into our community. So, I mean, there's 5 podcasts right there that I'm gonna listen to learn a little bit about industry news and things like that. So it's not all like career building things. It's just acclimating to the environment and becoming naturally immersed in what goes on, and immersed in the conversations. So we talked a little bit about that kind of stuff. And if cybersecurity is what you want to do for you cyber folks, you can do the same path, because when it comes to audit, compliance, security, intrusion detection, et cetera, it all requires configuration. It all requires standardization, deployment very quickly, reducing time when it comes to how much billable hours you're using from your consultants to do outside audits and things like that. And having all of your configuration for security and compliance as code in a version control system allows you to version it and see update history, who did what, when did they do it, and have visibility into that for audit trails. But it also gives you the ability to go really fast and also roll things back just as fast should there be an issue with something that breaks some sort of application functionality or something like that. So, regardless of what industry you're working in, you should be familiar with how programming languages work. Um, a little bit of hands on experience so you can look at code and at least understand kind of what it does. Maybe not how to type it out yourself from scratch, but just look at, some lines of code and be like, okay, this does this. Um, to be able to speak to it and to be able to communicate with your developers when you as a cyber person say, hey, I need to implement this, can you do this? Having an informed opinion about something so that you know better what to request and what kind of their requirements are will help build that relationship and get you both to the end goal much, much faster. And this would be like a DevSecOps kind of role or something like that. Outside of security and development world, if you're coming from the developer side and you really like the code, you can stick to the developer side. And instead of maybe getting an architect certification, you can get an AWS developer certification or a DevOps certification or maybe even SysOps, something like that. They're not going to be wildly useful for you in becoming a better developer per se. It's just kind of learning a system and how to utilize that to deploy your code the way that you want to do it, but it's definitely something that the market as a career switcher would see as a validation of your skills. So that's really it. Because I have a friend who's Pablo. Hey, what's up, dude? A really, really, really accomplished Python programmer who is AWS developer certified, and that really hasn't done much for him other than just be like, I have this badge, you can hire me or whatever. But what it really comes down to is knowledge of the programming. So if you're coming from that side, programming and having projects in a Git portfolio or whatever on your resume is definitely something you want to focus on as you lead through that. So projects is really what's going to come into it. And you can do those on your own. You can go on Fiverr and agree to redo somebody's website or write some backend scripts or rewrite some Excel stuff that they have into Python or whatever and put it in their task manager in Windows to help automate their job. Stuff you can do. It's really simple and it's super helpful for people. And it gives you some experience. So there's a bunch of different ways you can come into this, but as a career switcher, you definitely want to look at how do I do this from where I am and where do I want to go. So a big question I get most of the time is, hey, I saw someone today ask, I'm an executive assistant, like how do I get into this? Well, you probably have scheduling tasks and reminders and all this other stuff that you do as a regular part of your job, managing a calendar. How can you do that using code? Can you? And so sometimes just deciding whether or not something is worth investing your time is a really good skill because we've all gone, in my industry, gone down that rabbit hole and been like, yeah, we shouldn't do this. So being able to decide that is also a skill. Um, so yeah, I think that wherever you are, whether you're an executive assistant, if you work at a car sales, if you work in an office, if you work in a support, um, IT support help desk, if you work, I was a musician in the military. There's even things I can do as a musician that help automate things from an operational perspective. So you just kind of have to rethink, reimagine how you do your job and go, how can I leverage technology to make my job easier, to make my product better, to increase my quality of life, things like that. And that's what we want to focus on. So if you are returning from the panel at Regent University, feel free to leave a comment. Let me know what kind of questions you have. And if you'd like to hear more about the AWS hiring process, I can talk about that. But essentially what we need is look at the job requirements for the jobs you really want at AWS and just kind of work backwards, right? Reverse engineer that path and see where it takes you. You might find that once you get into it, you really aren't interested in that, but you're really interested in something else. Well, pursue that and just go. And just try to take all these things and apply them to the work you're doing now so that you can get them on your resume as soon as possible to increase the amount of experience you have. So that's where I'll start with this. If you have any questions, let me know. And if not, I'll see you later.